Today we're going to take a look at adolescent development. So we're going to look at this within the context of broader lifespan development, and I think we all know that adolescence is a critical transition period, and it's marked by a lot of things, biological, psychological, and social changes. So we'll take a look at the developmental tasks of adolescence with a special focus on Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. But we'll also consider how contemporary issues like social media and mental health trends shape adolescent identity today. So let's begin by looking at the major developmental tasks of adolescence. First, there are the physical changes, puberty and ongoing brain development, especially in the brief prefrontal cortex, which affects decision making and impulse control. And second, we see cognitive changes, including the ability to think abstractly and reason through moral dilemmas. Third, adolescents are engaged in major psychosocial changes, forming their identity, seeking autonomy, and prioritizing peer relationships. And all of these changes interact and influence one another as the adolescent moves through the stage. I do want to note, though, that puberty is happening a lot earlier than most people think. And honestly, it's really happening before adolescence for most kids, especially kids of color in the United States. We could talk more about that at a later point, but just wanted to highlight that. So, according to Erickson, the key psychosocial conflict during adolescence is identity versus role confusion. So, this stage is all about exploring personal values, beliefs, and long term goals. So, when adolescents are supported in this exploration, they are more likely to emerge with a stable and coherent identity. But when exploration is hindered, they may struggle with confusion, instability, and a lack of direction. So, as counselors and therapists, we need to understand where our clients are in this developmental process and what supports they may need. So, working with adolescents requires building trust and rapport, much like any other group. Many adolescents are navigating identity issues for the first time, and they need a space that feels safe and non judgmental. So, as counselors, we can support this identity exploration by asking the kinds of things we would normally do, open ended questions, and affirming their autonomy. We must also stay aware of the cultural, familial, and social pressures that shape adolescent identity, and understanding these pressures helps us respond with greater empathy and, of course, effectiveness. Adolescents today, I think, face a lot of unique challenges and opportunities due to contemporary influences. So, social media plays a powerful role in shaping identity, both positively and negatively. And for LGBTQIA youth, identity formation can involve added layers of complexity and risk, and counselors must be knowledgeable and affirming in supporting clients through these processes. We also need to be aware of current mental health trends among adolescents, including rising rates of anxiety and depression, and these issues often intersect with identity development and must be addressed, I think, holistically. So, on this slide, I want to focus on the current mental health landscape for LGBTQIA plus adolescents as reported by the Trevor Project in their 2024 national survey of over 18,000 youth aged 13 to 24. So first, nearly 40% of LGBTQ IA young people seriously considered suicide in the past year, and this figure rises to 46% for transgender and non-binary youth. I've seen higher statistics in other places. Second, more than 12% of LGBTQIA youth and 14% of transgender and non-binary youth have attempted suicide in that time frame. Again, I've seen higher numbers than this reported in other places. Third, anxiety and depression symptoms are prevalent. So 66% report anxiety and 53% report depression, with rates especially high among transgender and non-binary individuals, with that being 71% anxiety and 59% depression. And this is higher than the numbers that we see for non-LGBTQIA youth. So fourth, half of LGBTQIA youth who wanted mental health care were unable to access it. And that's just devastating, given those statistics I just gave you. So, a striking 90% reported that political developments, not surprisingly where we are right now, negatively impacted their well being. So, these data really underscore the elevated mental health risks facing LGBTQIA adolescents, as well as barriers to access and the critical context of social political stressors right now. In general, adolescence is a critical time for brain development, and although the brain stops growing in size by early adolescence, again, typically age 12 for girls, 14 for boys, the teen years are focused on fine tuning the brain function. So the prefrontal cortex, which is located behind the forehead, is one of the last areas to mature, and that typically happens into the mid to late 20s. So this area specifically is essential for things like decision making, planning, and impulse control. Adolescent brain development is closely tied to social experiences. So, changes in areas of the brain responsible for social processing make teens focused on, or maybe like not just focused, more focused, right, on their peer relationships. So, this focus can lead to things like increased risk taking, um, not always negatively. Joining a new club or speaking to someone new are also forms of risk taking. So, risk taking isn't always negative. So the adolescent brain specifically is highly plastic, meaning it adapts and changes in response to new experiences. So activities like taking challenging classes, exercising, or creating art and music can help to strengthen the brain's circuits. And this ability supports both intellectual growth and emotional regulation right into adulthood. So, because the brain is still developing, teens may react to stress differently than we would as adults, and this heightened sensitivity may increase the risk of developing stress-related disorders such as anxiety and depression. So, recognizing triggers and practicing coping strategies is vital for overall mental well-being here. So, teens experience changes in melatonin, the sleep hormone, and it stays elevated later at night and drops later in the morning, which explains why teens often stay up late and struggle to wake early. And this leads to a chronic sleep deprivation cycle, which can affect school performance, focus, and emotional regulation. Adolescence is often when mental health issues first emerge. So, the convergence of that physical, neurological, and social changes that I talked about does increase vulnerability to mental illness. And so, conditions like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and eating disorders often begin during this period. So, looking at it from a different paradigm, for decades, adolescent behavior was interpreted through a deficit lens, focusing on what teens lack. But current neuroscience is changing that narrative, and researchers like Eva Telzer and BJ Casey highlight how the adolescent brain is not broken or immature, but rather flexible, highly sensitive to context, and geared toward growth. And there's a new emphasis on large longitudinal and ecologically valid studies to better understand adolescence within the environments they actually live. Contrary to old assumptions, teens do not simply shift from parents to peers. Studies show teens' brains synchronize with their parents in emotional contexts, and they also tend to emulate risky behaviors from parents more than peers, actually. So these findings underscore the ongoing importance of parent relationships during adolescence, and not just emotionally, but in neurological terms as well. Um, as Eva Tesler puts it, the goal isn't to fix or rewire adolescent brains, it's to shape the social environments around them. So, adolescents are capable of profound pro social behavior and activism when properly supported. And that means our focus in counseling or even education or policy should be in optimizing these contexts. It's kind of what I've been talking about, right? So, it's the leitmotif, not pathologizing teen behavior. So, again, how do we optimize environments that really allow people to thrive across the lifespan is an overarching goal of mine as we discuss things.